right.
Awesome to talk to you, John. Thanks for coming.
As well. I like the stuff you guys are doing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's just trying to follow in
your footsteps.
Yeah, footsteps that have been laid down. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I definitely watched so many of your videos with Devon.
Yeah, especially the old ones.
Yeah.
They were stupid.
Yeah, they're hilarious. They're hilarious.
They were fun to do. It was different back then a little bit, I think.
Oh yeah, YouTube was totally different.
Goofiness, right? We didn't do it. Nobody was doing it for money.
Yeah.
We were just doing it just to be stupid and have fun and I guess use Devon's fame or whatever you call it at that point, just to kind of get us all out there and goof around and have fun.
Yeah.
Now you see a lot more, I think, clickbait and stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, the whole YouTube itself has changed and evolved in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? So people figured out the tricks of the trade, so to speak, for, like you said, the clickbait stuff and all that. And so you gotta play the game at some point.
Sure.
So, but if you don't have useful content or something valuable to say, I don't think
you won't last.
Yeah, I don't think the long game will play out. You know.
So all of our old stuff wouldn't have went anywhere.
Well, I mean, it's still valuable. Like, a lot of the information there is still valuable. I know a lot of the stuff is silly, but definitely the information you guys were putting out was
that's
awesome.
true.
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff that we're doing and the ideas that we have all come from watching that stuff. You know what I mean? And then just thinking about it.
I haven't seen anyone else really talk about these topics, like in the past 7 years since you put out those videos.
Yeah, philosophy, like the philosophy side of it, I guess, or the theory side of it. That's that extent. You know, it's funny to us how many pullers that are like great pullers that still consider it just a strength sport. You know, which to both of us, it's not a strength sport. Strength is the number one factor, but it's definitely a martial art before it's a strength sport to us anyway.
And that's the part that's fun, in my opinion. This is the combat sport. Like powerlifting is a strength sport, but it's not necessarily a fun sport. But arm wrestling is a martial art where you get to beat a guy who's stronger than you because you're better than him. And that's the fun.
Well, I like the path that you guys are taking. You're really expanding on and going into more detail and oftentimes more scientifically than what Devon and I were doing. Like all the things we had talked about like had merit, but you're putting it now into a way that like a scientist or mathematician or someone interested in that, the reasonings why they happen or how they happen, or there's a lot of other things you guys are really getting into the detail, and I really enjoy that part of it as well. So
that's cool that you say it that way. I think because our powerlifting background, like the kinesiology and all that stuff, the ideas there with, like you said, the science part of it, like you always have to have a control, like when you're doing an experiment, and it's really hard with training to do that because there's so many different variables all the time to zero in on what is the specific thing that's making a difference and what is the difference it's making. So trying to apply that kind of thought process to arm wrestling and like what is making, you know, my hook better or my top roll better or my press better, starting to analyze it from that angle, I think was what really we got kind of obsessed about, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of, so we had a few topics, and that really leads us to the first topic, I guess, right, of like the idea of the counters and the hill and stuff, and just trying to understand that a little more, because that thinking about that deeper definitely spawned from the we had a little Facebook message back and forth a while ago talking about like what's the best counter for, I think I was asking you for like a low hand top roll, like what would be the best counter for that or something. I can't remember what it was we were talking about, but you basically explained that like for a top roll, the press, and for the press is a hook, like what Devon did to Jerry, and then for a hook, it's usually a top roll. Like, and that's how we came up originally with that little kind of drill, and everything started to span from there. So we wanted,
and of course we all know that those are very generic. Examples.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It's not like written in stone, but yeah, of course.
No, exactly. And that's none of it's written in stone. That's the point. Is so. It's kind of like, I don't know, it's like improvising in music, like playing jazz or something. Like you got to learn the scales, and then once you know the scales, you can fuck around with them like crazy and start doing King's Move and flop press and being like a wild man. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yep.
So can you maybe just clarify what you mean by like what a counter is in arm wrestling? What constitutes a counter?
Okay.
Like the hard and soft thing, I think is something that like I feel like I understand, or we feel like we understand, but then we can't explain it, and we can't really like as soon as we go to try to articulate it, we're like, wait, do I really understand this, or what is the difference? You know?
Yeah.
So maybe trying to understand that a little bit more.
Oh boy, the hard soft counters. That's really in depth, and that's more a Devon kind of thing.
Okay.
For me to attempt to explain that properly,
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't do that. I don't think I'm qualified enough to do that. But as far as simple counters, I can maybe get into something like that. But the hard and soft ones, you're best to get the answer right from the top on that. I think I don't want to give your viewers the wrong information or say something that may be off a little bit.
Okay, no worries. That makes sense.
Yep.
So then what do you mean about the, like you said, the more standard counters, or the more basic, like what you were just saying that you might feel more comfortable
Sure.
commenting
So,
on? Like,
generally speaking, I tend to consider myself as more of a counter puller. I was more reactive to what my opponents were doing or what they were about to do, more so than just like blasting off right off the start.
like a silver bullet or something, like one thing to go to.
Which I wish I had. I just never really had a silver bullet. That's probably the best way to go about it because you don't really have to think about it. But that didn't suit me as well. So what I would normally do is either from competing with the opponent before or feeling him on the table is find out what he's going to do and then apply my counters to that, for instance. And oftentimes one move works very good against another. So sometimes you're trying to lead someone into a trap. Other times you're trying to cut them off before they get there. But a counter type of puller is finding a way to not let their opponent get where they want to be and making them uncomfortable and sort of working from there. So a counter, my type of counter, for instance, was stopping the match somewhere and then working on offense.
Right.
Where opposite would be someone just trying to blast away from the pin. You can straight do that as a counter as well. Like, for instance, a famous one would be Jerry Carteret versus Travis Bajan.
Right.
Jerry's counter to Travis's top roll is just go straight under him with a flop.
Press, yeah.
So he's trying to initiate the pin with the counter.
Right.
Whereas I tended to more or less go for control with a counter as opposed to winning the match with a counter. Okay.
So like maybe an example of like for a defensive hook, for example, would that be one where you're kind of giving something away to get into that position? Like you're letting your opponent think that they're getting something that they want?
Yes, absolutely. And I found that to be true more times than not. And that especially works good against, of course, like the top roll type of guys, or even maybe an inside press type of guy.
Right.
You sort of lead them or let them lead you. How do you say? To where a component of their move breaks down and you can snatch them.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Is there a difference between certain counters? Like one counter might be good against the move, but there's another counter that's even better. Like
absolutely.
Like
that's true right across the board. Go ahead.
Thinking flop press and king's move, for example, they kind of counter each other in every fundamental. So that's why the matches tend to last for 5 minutes. But maybe a king's move isn't really the best option against the flop press. Maybe it's more like a low hand top roll where you keep more of your arm so you can get into a press position. Is that?
I also think a hook is a very good move against the flop wristed press.
Right, yeah.
Like Ron Bath did that very effectively against Jerry Carteret. Devon's done it against, and Jerry's the best flop wrister on the planet.
Yeah, for sure.
Anytime someone can get a win on Jerry Carteret, you look at how they did it, why they did it.
And in all those scenarios, what you said, they're sort of cutting him off, as opposed to leading him to a path. They're cutting him off to his path, right? Like you were saying, the kind of two different ways that you would go about a counter.
Right, that's exactly true.
Like diving in for a hook when he's coming in for his press, you're just trying to get your shoulder there before he does, basically, is the...
Probably, yeah, that's definitely a way to do it. Also, I find if you can get like just below his hinge point, like a flop presser wants you up here.
Right.
You can hook him here. He doesn't have the same type of press as he has if he's here.
Yeah.
So it's not only about shoving your shoulder in. Sometimes it's about literally lowering your palm, for instance.
Actually blocking his hand.
Yeah, blocking his hand point, blocking his wrist.
Yeah,
I suppose more so than his hand.
that's interesting.
From getting underneath. Right?
Yeah,
because it's such like minor pressures, right? Like you said, he's trying to push down. That's why it works so good against the top roll, because the top roller is trying to go up, but where he's putting all his force, the presser is not fighting.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
And then he starts pushing down and into your elbow, and
That's what I see as a soft counter, right? So like the kickback and the pronation, they kind of
Yes,
they offset each other,
you're right.
and then a
That
hard
would be considered a soft counter.
cut versus pronation.
or like blocking the wrist, like what you were saying, right? Like that's like cutting it off. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes
I
sense.
think that's more of a hard counter, the block of the wrist.
Yeah, that's what we're saying. Yeah, that's
Right,
the
yes, the other
soft
ones.
is the hard counter, and the
Yes.
soft is where you go both. Yeah, okay, that makes sense actually.
Yeah.
Finally, do you want to talk
Yeah.
about the regripping and the?
Yeah, well, you talked to Devon recently about.
Well, yeah, about
yeah,
that. Again, that's something that he was talking about. I don't know how much I want to go down that path without, because it's still just beginning of that thought. But
it was the
but
idea
like,
of like,
where does regripping
Yeah.
sit on the hill? You know, like
Yeah.
what is the idea of regripping? Where is it on the hill? And as we've been thinking about it more, originally I thought it was just kind of moving between spots, but it's clearly not when you think about it a little deeper. So I don't know if he mentioned that to you at all, but that was something we were thinking, is like
an evolution of the hill is, where does regripping fit on it? Yeah, can it help you climb up the hill to get more fundamental position,
or is it just about getting a better position in a better leverage in the position that you're already in? You know what I mean?
Well, you also have to consider regripping can be lower, getting a lower position as well.
Yeah, that's
Regripping's not only height, it could
Right.
be depth, it could be the opposite of depth, some space,
Yeah.
and it could be inching lower to increase your flop wristed pressure, right?
Right.
So
yeah, that's
people often think of regripping as gaining height, because that's the most common way we see it. But regripping can be
just
literally anywhere.
changing your hand position in some minor way.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah,
Okay,
that's really interesting.
there's another concept I wanted to run by you, and this is from my kind of obsession over the last couple of weeks about the scapula and how important it is. And so when someone teaches you how to set up on an arm wrestling table, they usually start with elbow inside your body, shoulder down, and shoulder and forward. So you're protracted and it's depressed. And I was just thinking, well, there's three other actions of the scapula. There's elevation, there's upward rotation, and there's retraction. And I was just wondering, is there any validity in those actions on the table?
Like, how much do you feel like your scapula is actually changing position, or is it just your body position and you always want to be in this forward, down, inside position? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The more we've, I don't know, he's been nerding out about it, and I've been not sure how.
So I've noticed a lot of outside pullers will set up with their arm outside their body, kind of
Sure.
in that upwardly rotated position. Dustin does this really well in his high hook,
Mhm.
and you see kings movers with their arm outside their body. They're not kings moving in here. So obviously there's validity in this outward rotation, and I just wasn't really sure about elevation. Maybe that helps with up pressure, and retraction. Maybe retraction isn't really used too much because that's kind of awkward. But maybe in a king's move, you're retracting a little bit. I'm not really sure.
I think they're all valid. First of all, I think you guys are too smart for me, but they're all valid. Literally any movement, because there's so many different movements in arm wrestling, and this whole thing about setting up, like, okay, that's a great way to initiate someone into learning about arm wrestling, shoulder in and elbow tucked, everything. Right, that's great. But as you develop, you learn there's literally so many paths to victory.
Right.
That there's no one answer. And yes, to your question, there's a lot of validity to all the different movements in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right, cool.
So it's so complex.
Yeah. That's again, that's what we love about it, and that's, I think, what also shows how it is definitely more of a martial art. You know what I mean? Of a science, and than just lifting a weight. You know, if you want to test somebody's strength, then we can do the Mazurenko lifts, we can do the the arm PRs, like whatever, those are testing your singular strength in something, but that's not arm wrestling. Arm wrestling is wrestling. It's a fight. It's a combat sport, 100%. So with that being said, I guess the next thing that we wanted to talk about was the idea of peaking, because peaking, again, for a strength sport, I think is a lot different than peaking for, let's say, a boxing match or an MMA fight or something like that. And that's something we've really been trying to figure out, is this balance between, like in powerlifting, you want to be as rested as possible, but you want to have the movement, like you want the squat to be like the only thing you know how to do. Like you've almost forgotten how to tie your shoes, but you can like squat perfectly, and your deadlift form is exactly how it's supposed to be, because it's like the only thing you've been doing, you know, the closer and closer you get to the meet.
Yeah.
So there's kind of like, what do you think is the right method? I guess we wanted to just divide it kind of into two categories for arm wrestling. Is it better to like hone your skills on the table, or come in as fresh as possible? And
am I asking that correctly? With fresh joints, fresh elbow, fresh shoulder
is obviously important, but how do you balance that with being like having your lanes like dialed in?
Yeah.
Other than just doing dry runs on the table, which obviously we've implemented, but is there any...
So this is going to be another boring vanilla answer, but because of all the variables in the sport, there's an answer for everything. Right. There's validity in everything. There's validity to coming in tight, ready, and there's also validity to come in really loose, haven't trained in a while, nothing hurts, everything feels good, maybe feeling a little soft. There's validity in everything. There's validity in coming in trained up for like an endurance, like a 6-round trench war with a guy you know is known for his endurance. And there's validity in coming in super hot for somebody who's say a big time hitter. You know, there's validity in all of these. So to repeat the theme, and even though it's boring, there's literally an answer for everything. You just have to really find out which one is most applicable to that moment in time, such as a super match or a tournament or a series of super matches.
Right. So honing it to your opponent or to the situation is definitely the way to go, right? Like
I think so.
Like the key, and then after that, what's the right thing for the right opponent? That's then becomes a whole nother, can of worms that you got to deal with. But
because if you look at, for instance, a standard double elimination tournament or triple elimination tournament, that's one format.
Right.
If you look at a super match, 3 of 5 or best of 6, like whatever you're looking at, that's another format. If you look at, say, what we had in the bottom 8, where it's a series of super matches, all 3 different formats. I don't want to say they're all 3 different preps, but they could be all 3 different preps.
Yeah, for sure. Especially depending on the opponent, right? Like you just said, like if you know that you're going against somebody who's going to try to like get you into an endurance battle and hold the match up, then you might train differently than if you're going against somebody who's going to try to hit, at 1,000 miles an hour. And those are probably 2 different types of prep. So that's, I guess, one thing. Did you ever feel that you were able to peak a certain part of your performance in the sense of like if you're coming into somebody, like for example, my match with Evan coming up, if I feel that there's a certain vector or lane that might be best for me to go with, would it make sense in my peak to kind of focus on that lane, or just make sure that I'm as strong as I can be everywhere? You know what I mean? With that, if you were going into a match like that, would you focus on a specific thing, depending on sometimes?
I think I would. Wherever I felt my opponent was exploitable.
Okay.
And that could be a lane, it could be a part of the anatomy, it could be a part of their endurance, it could be a part of their strength. But ideally, yes, I would focus on literally the chink in the armor.
So if it's like you felt you needed more rise for this guy, like rise was the answer, you would just be hammering your rise or making sure that your riser was as peaked as possible, kind of thing?
I probably would.
Yeah.
I probably would, because not only does it build strength, but
like
it builds confidence in that area.
Right.
So you're building strength, plus building strength is one thing and it's great.
Yeah.
But you need to be confident enough to execute in
a
real life match scenario when it's really important.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I would focus on, I don't know if you want to call them vectors, or that's the hot word these days, or lanes or areas. Yes, I would focus.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, you're obviously going to train all of it, but you're going to maybe like focus in a little bit more on either cupping or pronating, depending on what it is you feel, or like you said, endurance. Maybe like if you feel that if you have the upper edge on finishing the match when your arms are pumped up, then maybe that's the thing you need to work on, whatever they are that way. So that's really cool.
So just going back to your idea that prepping for a tournament versus super match would be different. And the idea of that would be like in a super match you want a little more endurance, and in a tournament you kind of want to be more explosive, be more strong, so you can finish matches quicker and not tire yourself out for future tournament polls.
That's I suppose that's very general, but yes.
Yeah.
And again, to suit your style, if you're not an endurance puller, there's no sense really trying to ramp that up for a one-on-one versus a guy. Like, let's say you're going in against Crazy George, for instance.
Right.
Known for his endurance. He's on the extreme one end of the spectrum. Yeah. I don't think it'd be wise to ramp up your endurance because you'll never catch it.
Right.
You're catching a falling knife at that point.
Yeah.
I would, against a puller like that, focus on an area like Jason said earlier, focus on that one lane where you think you can get him.
Yeah.
But overall, yes, to your question, yeah, overall.
Yeah, that's kind of like what Michael Todd has been talking about, where, he knows that Levan beats him in 9 out of 10 areas in the gym, but Michael has that one lane.
Yeah.
And he's not worried about catching him up on the other lanes because it's never going to happen. So he's just going to hammer that one lane that he has and hope that's enough.
That's what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
That's really what it's all about when it comes down to anything. You can look across the board at fighting or wrestling or almost any combative sport. You want to find that spot where you can take your opponent out in the most efficient way possible.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about fighting, one of the things that comes to mind is like leg kicks, which just played itself out in Conor McGregor's most recent fight, but like how brutal good leg kicks can be and how overlooked they can be. And it's such a simple thing that can just completely end a fight with just one lane. Somebody's better than you and everything else, but you're able to, hit him with a baseball bat to his quad a couple times and
that's a perfect example.
Yeah. So I've said the same thing because I obviously we all want to see this match, which leads us to our next topic about the whole contracts and PAL and everything. But like with the Michael and Levan match, if it happens, the argument I was making is that art arm vector that Michael pulls, that open hand top roll, the bottom line is that he did pull 275 pounds in that lane, and none of Levan's vectors go over 200 pounds. They're all ridiculous considering the lane that they are. But when he tried the art arm, he tapped out way before 200 pounds. And when all his other vectors all tap out around 180, 190 pounds, which again, for what he's doing is mind-bogglingly strong. But again, if it's that one lane, like do all those vectors combined, do they hold off that 275 pound like hit to his fingers?
That's the $1 million question.
We have to find out. Like, you have to see it. There's no way to do lifts in the gym and see him pull him and him pull that guy and figure it out. You have to see them pull. That's the only way, because you don't know how strong that leg kick is until you see if that guy can actually take it. And
I almost want to say that's probably only true with Michael Todd.
Right.
In a sense, if you took two conventional arm wrestlers and you pitted them against each other, and one was extremely dominant, and you could almost guess that he would beat this guy as well.
Obviously, yeah.
Come in something like Michael Todd, where he has like nothing like anyone else.
Yep.
It's difficult to pick. Anyone who says, I know who's going to win, or this guy's going to crush that guy, isn't being truthful.
Yeah.
No.
Nobody knows. Like, you may have a strong opinion. Like, I may think Levan could win, but I wouldn't say I know Levan could win, or Michael.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Nobody knows, and there's a lot of that going on. But I'll say preemptively, because I think we're going to touch on this later, I think that's good for the sport.
Yeah. Well, that's as we touch on it now. Yeah. So you think the idea.